Welcome back to Movies Explained. Today's film is a mystery horror from 2023 titled, Knock at the Cabin. The movie opens in the woods, where a young girl named One carefully catches a grasshopper and places it in a jar. Now that the grasshopper is safely contained in the jar, One takes out a notebook and gives it a name. It becomes clear that catching grasshoppers and taking notes on their behavior is one of Wen's hobbies. As One is engrossed in studying the grasshopper's movements, she is suddenly interrupted by a stranger named Leonard, who approaches her. Despite being a stranger to One, Leonard tries to befriend her by joining her in catching more grasshoppers and placing them in the jar. One shares with Leonard that she has two fathers, Daddy Eric and Daddy Andrew. Leonard looks around the forest, as if expecting to see someone. Seeing no one, he proposes a game in which they take turns asking each other questions. When One asks why he's there, Leonard confesses that he has a broken heart and is in the woods to do something he will regret. As they continue to play, three figures with large sharp weapons approach. One panics and runs towards the cabin, but Leonard warns her to tell her dads to let them in or they will have to find a way themselves. One immediately rushes to her fathers and informs them of what has occurred. As they discuss the situation, Leonard abruptly knocks on the door and requests to speak with them about something very important. Eric politely asks Leonard to leave them alone, mentioning that they are not expecting anyone. Despite Eric's reluctance, Leonard persists, and Eric questions him about the others who are with him. Leonard introduces Sabrina, Redmond, and Adrian, and explains that they are there to rescue a group of people. Andrew attempts to observe them through the window, only to discover that they are armed. Andrew tries to call the police but realizes that the lines have been cut, and there is no mobile service available. Redmond shouts for them to open the door to de-escalate the tension, and panic sets in as the strangers start trying to force their way inside. The family quickly locks every entrance and barricades the doors, but the intruders persist and eventually manage to break in. After breaking into the cabin, a physical altercation ensues between Eric and Sabrina, resulting in Eric falling and losing consciousness. Meanwhile, Andrew fights and manages to overpower Redmond with force. Eventually, Leonard breaks in through the main door and the strangers are able to subdue the family and gain control of the situation. Sabrina takes charge and tends to Eric's wound, showing a surprising level of compassion towards their captives. The story flashbacks to Eric meeting Andrew's parents. The atmosphere is tense and the silence suggests that Andrew's parents are uncomfortable with their son's sexuality. As they leave, Andrew is disappointed with his parents' behavior and their early departure, especially after a long 7-hour drive. Eric reassures him that they will always be together, no matter what. Eric is currently suffering from a concussion and is experiencing sensitivity to light due to his fall. It is revealed that he and Andrew are tied up, and the group tries to comfort One by playing cartoons for her. After things calm down, the group introduce themselves and their backgrounds. First, Sabrina shares that she was a nurse for 5 years and used to live in Southern California. She has a half-sister at home and One reminds her of her sister. Then comes Leonard, who is from Chicago and is a second-grade teacher. He is also a bartender and runs an after-school program. Redmond initially refuses to introduce himself, believing it is a waste of time. However, after Leonard insists, Redmond reveals that he is from Medford, Massachusetts, and works for the gas company. He also admits that he did some questionable things when he was young and stupid, and remembers his father beating him. Adrian jumps in between and begins to tell her story. She used to work as a line cook at a Mexican restaurant in DuPont Circle and has 2 cats named Riff and Raff. Suddenly, Leonard switches off the TV and explains why they are all there, stating that the 4 of them have been seeing visions of apocalyptic events. He adds that the family has been chosen to deliver a sacrifice to ensure humanity's survival. They are informed that one of them must be killed as a sacrifice. He warns that if the family fails to choose, catastrophic events will start happening, and they are told that they cannot commit suicide. Despite this, Eric and Andrew refuse to sacrifice anyone. The family is also informed that if they do not comply, they will be forced to live through the end of everything and wander alone in a desolate world. Leonard continues to describe his visions of the apocalypse, which includes cities drowning, and oceans swelling and pounding buildings and people into the sand, dragging everything out to sea. Andrew is skeptical and believes there is something wrong with the group, while Eric suggests that their visions may have been dreams with multiple interpretations. Suddenly, Redmond steps forward and covers his face with a white cloth. As this happens, the sun reflects off a mirror behind Redmond, and Eric sees something in the reflection. Sabrina and Adrian both thrust their weapons into his head, and immediately Leonard decapitates him. The story flashes back to the time when Eric and Andrew first adopted One. She had a cleft palate at birth, but they were able to have it surgically fixed. Leonard flicks on the TV, and the family huddles around it, watching in horror as images of devastating earthquakes and tsunamis flood the screen. The death toll is staggering, and the group can't help but feel the weight of the world's despair on their shoulders. As the chaos and tension continue to rise in the group, Eric begins to feel uneasy and his mind drifts back to a happy memory. He recalls a previous trip to the woods and how much fun they had as a family. Sabrina steps in to take care of Eric's head injury, providing him with comfort by rebandaging his wound. As they try to make sense of their situation, one attempts to flee the house, sneaking into the basement. Leonard, however, is quick to follow and is able to catch her before she can go very far. As he comes back, he explains the rule that no one is allowed to leave. Andrew suddenly wonders if all of this has anything to do with their sexuality because he recognizes Redmond as the man who assaulted him years ago. The group assures him that their captors have no interest in their sexual orientation. Leonard tells him about the students he trains and shows him a photograph of them. As they prepare to sleep, Leonard turns Eric and Andrew's chairs towards each other so that they can discuss their next move. One hugs Eric before heading to sleep. As morning comes, Adrian takes charge of the kitchen and begins cooking breakfast for one. In the midst of the chaos, she quietly passes a knife to Eric while Andrew shares his suspicions about the group that they are from some online message board and are staging everything to deceive them. As the time for the family to choose again arrives, Adrian comes forward to plead her case. She tells them about her son, Charlie, and how she's seen visions of his death repeatedly. The screams of her child have been haunting her, and she begs the group to consider this when making their decision. But despite her heartfelt appeal, Andrew remains resolute in his decision to refuse to sacrifice anyone. Frustrated with their lack of progress, she puts a white piece of cloth on her face. Leonard and Sabrina do the rest by thrusting their weapons into her. Afterwards, they turn on the TV to watch the news, which is reporting on the spread of a deadly virus that has started to spread. However, Andrew notices that the report is pre-recorded and that he has been reading about the virus for months. This gives him further reason to suspect that the group is lying to them. With Eric's signal, one begins shouting, causing a distraction as Eric cuts himself free and grabs one of the weapons. While they try to calm him down, Andrew breaks free and heads for his gun inside the car. As Andrew reaches the car, he realizes that the tires have been slashed. Suddenly, Sabrina attacks him and injures his leg, but he manages to throw dirt in her face and runs into the car. As he enters the car, he locks the doors, and Sabrina begins hammering on the windows, trying to stop him. Andrew searches the car and eventually finds his gun, which he uses to force Sabrina to drop her weapon. In a flashback, Andrew is at the bar, where he was assaulted by a man who looks similar to Redmond, but with a bigger beard. The man was later imprisoned, but Andrew learns self-defense and purchases a gun. After arriving back at the cabin, Andrew is filled with anger towards Leonard for everything he and his group have put them through. He threatens Leonard, but Sabrina rushes in, startling Andrew and prompting him to shoot her in a panic. Leonard is clearly upset by her death, but he then proceeds to behead her. Andrew is shocked by the brutal scene unfolding in front of him, but his focus quickly shifts to finding a way out of this situation. He grabs Redmond's wallet and confirms that he was indeed Rory O'Bannon, the man who attacked him at the bar. With a gun in hand, he orders Leonard to go into the bathroom with the intention of taking the vehicle that the group arrived in. After a few minutes, Andrew hears a window break and assumes that Leonard is trying to escape. He opens the bathroom door and shoots into the shower, but Leonard still manages to attack him despite being shot in the arm. After a brief struggle, Leonard disarms Andrew and turns the TV back on. As they watch the news, they see hundreds of airlines experiencing failures around the world, causing thousands of planes to suddenly crash from the sky. Andrew listens in disbelief as Leonard mimics the anchorwoman's speech. Shortly after, Leonard asks everyone to come out as it is the time for him to end his own life. Before doing anything, he says that they only have one last chance to prevent the disaster from occurring. If Leonard dies, they will only have a few minutes to make a decision. Eric instructs one to hide in the treehouse until someone comes to get her. When Eric and Andrew don't make a decision, Leonard warns them again and proceeds to slit his own throat. The sky grows darker, and lightning strikes the ground as more planes crash from the sky. Back inside the house, Eric confides in Andrew about the figure he saw in the sun's reflection, and how he has come to believe the group's visions were true. Each member represented an aspect of humanity, with Redmond symbolizing malice, Adrian representing nourishment, Sabrina representing health, and Leonard representing guidance. They were the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and their deaths were necessary. Eric prepares to make the ultimate sacrifice, but Andrew argues that humanity isn't worth saving because they hate and reject people like them. However, Eric describes a vision he had of a world that continues to thrive, with Andrew growing old and staying close to one. With this vision, Eric finds his peace as Andrew pulls the trigger. Andrew mourns his husband before going to retrieve one from the treehouse. Together, they walk until they come across the truck that Leonard's group arrived in. Andrew finds evidence proving that the group really were who they claimed to be. Leonard was a beloved coach, Sabrina a nurse, and he finds a photo of Adrian with Charlie. Andrew and Gwen drive to a diner where people are gathered, watching the news of the catastrophes coming to an end. Planes have landed safely, and the death toll from the virus has slowed down. Andrew and Gwen set out on an uncertain future together.